Men are weak because they are distracted. They chase a multitude of trivial ends, believing ambition alone is virtue. They fail because their energies are scattered, their will diluted by the opinions of the unworthy. This ends now. We do not speak of mere improvement. We will excise the disease of common ambition and replace it with a singular, unassailable principle to command fortune. One must first command oneself by severing the world. It is a truth, as ancient as it is ignored, that between how men live and how they ought to live is a gulf so vast that any leader who seeks to establish a lasting principate over his own domain, be it a kingdom, a company, or his own spirit, must learn to navigate its shadows. Let us then speak not of lofty ideals, which are but phantoms that lead to ruin, but of the cold, hard substance of reality. To be a modern prince is to exist in a state of profound isolation, for the crowd is a beast of shifting appetites, and counsel is often a weapon used by the envious to blunt your will. This is a meditation on power, not as one wishes it to be, but as it is a prize taken by the disciplined, the ruthless, and the strategically alone. You believe that seeking many opinions is a sign of wisdom, that to be democratic in your listening is to be secure in your rule. This is the first and most fatal deception. Consider the court of a Renaissance prince, a swirl of courtiers, each with a smile on his lips and a dagger of ambition tucked within his robe. The flatterer tells you what you wish to hear, to gain your favor. The moralist tells you what he thinks is virtuous, to chain you to his own weak conscience. The rival offers advice that seems sound, but which, if followed, would lead your own forces into an ambush from which only he would profit. This court has not vanished. It has merely transformed its garments. It is now your board of advisors, your social media feed, your well-meaning friends, the chorus of commentators and experts. It is a cacophony of other men's agendas. Why do you invite this noise? Because you fear the silence, the profound and terrifying silence of your own isolated judgment. For in that silence, there is no one to blame but yourself. To listen to the crowd is to borrow their weakness. To make a decision alone is to own your power and the consequences. Recall the fate of Louis XVI of France, a man who listened to everyone, his ministers, his wife, his court. He was a parliament of conflicting voices housed in a single, indecisive mind. He sought to please all factions, to balance all opinions. And where did this democratic spirit lead him? To the guillotine. The mob does not reward compromise, it devours hesitation. Your mind is your principality. Would you leave the gates open for every passing stranger, every merchant of opinion, every agitator with a grievance? No. Sovereignty begins with the control of borders. The first and most important border is your own ear. Every piece of counsel you receive is, in its essence, an attempt to manipulate your reality. Your subordinate who suggests a new strategy does so not only for the company's gain, but for his own prestige. Your partner who advises caution does so not only from prudence, but from a fear of risk that you may not share. Even this script you hear now is a form of counsel, and you must weigh it with the same cold suspicion. I do not speak of foolishly ignoring all information. I speak of the sovereign filter. You must learn to dissect the advice, to separate the cold, hard ore of fact from the slag of personal motive. But this is exhausting, is it not? To constantly be a diagnostician of hidden intentions. There is a more elegant solution. You must create a vacuum. You must, through a calculated and ruthless discipline, begin to silence the external world. Not with a shout, but with a gradual, imperceptible withdrawal. You stop soliciting opinions on matters you have already decided. You offer no justification for your decrees, for justification invites debate. You respond to inquiries with silence, or with a question that turns the gaze back upon the questioner. You become an enigma. In this vacuum, a marvelous transformation occurs. Your own judgment, no longer diluted by 1,000 foreign wines, begins to clarify, it hardens. It becomes sharp, like a blade that has been whetted on a single, fine stone. The noise fades, and in the ensuing quiet, you can finally hear the only voice that matters, the cold, calculating whisper of your own will. This is the essence of isolation. Not the loneliness of the hermit, but the formidable solitude of the citadel. From within these silent walls, your decisions become swift, unassailable, and entirely your own. Those around you will sense this shift. They will cease bringing you their petty problems and their whispered counsels, for they will know you are no longer a consumer of their chatter. You have become a source of decree. You have sealed the gates of your mind. You have silenced the tyranny of common counsel. But this is only the foundation, for in the silence you will find a new challenge arises. A leader alone is a target. Your next lesson, therefore, is not about building walls, but about building armies of dependence. How to make your silence not a weakness, but a weapon that binds others to you. But a fortress, while secure, is merely a defensive structure. A tomb can be a fortress. True power is not found in defense, but in dominion. And dominion requires that others serve your will, not out of fleeting loyalty, but from a chain of their own self-interest that you have forged. This is the art of manufacturing dependence. Consider the nature of man. He is by his very constitution a creature of appetite. He seeks gain. He avoids loss. He is drawn to pleasure and repelled by pain. This is not a condemnation, it is a blueprint. To believe men are motivated by higher virtues is a luxury for priests and philosophers, not for princes. Loyalty, it is a reed in the wind. It bends with the changing fortunes of the day. But self-interest is an oak with roots sunk deep into the soil of a man's own heart. Your task is not to command loyalty. Your task is to architect an environment where the self-interest of every person around you is served only when your interest is advanced. Look to the Roman emperors. They understood the populace cared not for the philosophical debates of the Senate, but for the price of bread and the spectacle of the games. Panem et circenses. Bread and circuses. They made the mob dependent on their largesse, and in doing so, purchased not love, but a functional and predictable obedience. The citizen who relies on your grain shipment for his supper will not easily be persuaded to man the barricades against you. Translate this to your own domain. Your subordinates, your partners, your rivals. What is their bread? What is their circus? Is it a commission? Is it public recognition? Is it access to your network? Is it the quiet security of your approval? You must become the sole, or at least the primary, distributor of that resource. A modern example stripped of its romanticism. The corporate leader who does not simply grant bonuses, but who structures entire compensation systems so that the prosperity of his key lieutenants is inextricably tied to a specific, personal metric of his success. He does not ask for their support. He builds a system where to oppose him is to financially wound themselves. This is not management. This is political engineering. You must weave your threads into the very fabric of their fortunes. Become the guarantor of their stability, the gateway to their ambition, the shield against their fears. When a man knows that his prosperity rises and falls with your own, his ingenuity, his effort, his very will becomes an instrument of your design. But be warned. This requires a surgeon's precision. Make a man too dependent, and you create a desperate, resentful hostage. Make him not dependent enough, and he retains the freedom to betray you. The balance is in controlling the flow of a necessary resource, while always maintaining your own absolute autonomy. You are not a member of this system of dependence. You are its architect and its master. You must be the only one who is truly free. Your own survival, your own power must never be tied to any single individual or faction beneath you. You are the sun, and they are the planets, bound by the gravity of the light and warmth you provide forever in your orbit. This is the cold calculus of control. You are not building a family. You are cultivating a garden of interests, which you alone can water or let wither. You bind them not with oaths, but with chains of gold and fear. They will serve you, believing they are serving themselves. And that is the most potent form of service there is. You have learned to make men need you, but need can fester into hatred if not tempered by a deeper, more primal emotion. To complete your dominion, you must master the currency of the human soul. You must learn why it is far safer to be feared than to be loved. But dependence is a chain of reason. It can be broken by a greater offer, a more tempting bargain. You have engaged their calculation. Now, you must conquer their instinct. We arrive at the most misunderstood, yet most essential, principle of command. The question was posed centuries ago: is it better to be loved than feared? The answer, proven by the bloody tide of history, is clear and unequivocal. Men are less concerned with offending one they love than one they fear. For love is preserved by a bond of obligation which, when it serves their purpose, men will break with scant hesitation to advance their own interests. But fear is preserved by a dread of punishment that never, ever fails. Consider this not as a moral question, but a mechanical one. What is more reliable? The gratitude of a man, which is fickle and fleeting, or his terror of losing his position, his reputation, his comfort, his very security? You can control the latter with precision. The former is a phantom, dancing on the wind. To be loved is to be negotiable. To be feared is to be inevitable. Look to the reign of Caesar Borgia. When he occupied Romagna, he found it lawless, ruled by petty, untrustworthy lords. He did not seek to win their affection. He appointed Ramiro de Orco, a man known for his harsh and cruel efficiency, to pacify the region. De Orco did his work too well. He established order through a reign of terror, and in doing so, became the object of the people's hatred. And what did Caesar do then? One morning, the citizens of Cesena found Ramiro de Orco's body, cut in 2 pieces, lying in the public square with a bloody knife beside him. The lesson was not one of mercy. It was a masterstroke of calculated fear. Caesar had used the man's cruelty, then sacrificed him to show that all punishment ultimately flowed from the prince alone. He was both the source of justice and the master of terror. The people were left, not loving him, but in a state of awestruck and obedient dread. This is the essence. Fear is not mere brutality. Brutality is the mark of the thug, and it breeds chaos. Strategic fear is the application of precise, predictable, and inescapable consequences. It is the understanding that a single, swift, and severe punishment for insolence is worth 1,000 rewards for loyalty. In your own realm, this translates not to shouting, but to an unshakable consistency. The subordinate who undermines your authority must not be reasoned with. He must be made an example of. His dismissal should be so swift, so final, and so public that it becomes a parable whispered in the corridors. It is not cruelty. It is political hygiene. You remove a cancer to preserve the body. When you are feared, you are freed. Freed from the desperate need to be liked. Freed from the tyranny of others' feelings. Freed to make the hard, necessary decisions that affection would complicate. Your word becomes law not because it is just, but because it is yours. Your silence becomes a weapon. Your gaze, a judgment. They will obey not because they want to, but because they have no other conceivable choice. Their obedience becomes a function of their own self-preservation, which you now control absolutely. This is the pinnacle of control. But here lies the final and most delicate balance. For fear, if it curdles into hatred, can indeed become a threat. The beast, if cornered and terrified, may yet turn and attack. So how does the prince wield this terrible instrument without creating a legion of secret enemies? How does he manage the theater of power itself? But the lion, for all its strength, cannot see the hunter's snare. It cannot discern the poison morsel from the wholesome meat. To rely on force alone is to be a beast, magnificent but doomed. A prince must therefore know how to act the part of the fox. The fox represents the strategic mind. It is the master of perception, the architect of appearances, the navigator of the shadows that lie between truth and belief. For in the affairs of men, what is often less important than what is perceived to be. Consider the Roman Emperor Augustus, heir to the murdered Julius Caesar. He did not seize power and declare himself a king, a title that had been made toxic by history. He presented himself as the humble restorer of the Republic, the reluctant first among equals. He cloaked his absolute, lion-like authority in the fox's skin of tradition and modesty. The Senate believed it still held power, even as he stripped it away piece by piece. He understood that the illusion of consent can be more stabilizing than the blunt reality of force. This is the fox's first lesson: the management of reputation. You must cultivate an image that serves your ends, regardless of the underlying truth. Are you a paragon of integrity, or a ruthless innovator? The answer is you are whatever the situation demands you to be. You must wear a mask and have a cupboard full of others, ready to be worn as the occasion requires. In your dealings, you must learn to say one thing while meaning another, to promise a path you have no intention of walking. This is not mere lying. It is strategic misdirection. You are a player on a stage, and your words are your props. Tell a rival you support his project. Let him expend his resources and reveal his weaknesses, while you observe from the shadows. Appear compassionate when severity would cause unnecessary rebellion. Appear generous when a gift can bind a potential enemy to you more effectively than a threat. The modern arena is ripe for this. The corporate leader who publicly champions a failing initiative, praising its team, all while his lieutenants quietly dismantle it and reassign its assets. He avoids the blame for the failure and secures the loyalty of those he saves by moving them. He has used the fox's cunning to avoid the lion's messy fight. But the fox's greatest power is in the art of the false flag. To let your enemy believe the threat comes from another quarter. To allow a scapegoat to absorb the public's frustration, which you yourself can then heroically remove. You must become a master of reading the terrain of human emotion and ambition, not to participate in it, but to manipulate its currents to your favor. Why is this necessary? Because the world is not a straightforward battlefield. It is a web of alliances and enmities, many of them hidden. The lion who charges blindly will find himself entangled, betrayed by those he thought were friends, undone by promises he was too straightforward to see were traps. The fox survives because he trusts no appearance and takes every word as a potential instrument. You must see the strings that move the puppets around you, and you must learn to pull them without anyone noticing your hand. This is the highest form of control, to shape the reality of others while they remain convinced the shape is their own. The fox does not break the rules. He simply understands that they are written in invisible ink, visible only to those who know how to hold them to the heat. You have learned to be both the lion of feared consequence and the fox of perceived virtue. But these are instruments of action. What of the great, unseen force that governs half of all our lives? What of the tempest of chance? To believe you control everything is the height of folly. The final mastery is to learn how to command the very currents of fortune herself. You have mastered the self. You have forged dependence, commanded fear, and wielded the cunning of the fox. But now we confront the ultimate adversary, an opponent that cares nothing for your strategies, your discipline, or your will. I speak of fortune. Men see her as a fickle goddess, a blind force that bestows her favors at random. They curse her when she withdraws and grow complacent when she smiles. This is the perspective of a slave, begging at the table of chance. The modern prince does not beg, he prepares. It is true that fortune is the arbiter of half our actions. She is the river in flood, capable of sweeping away the most carefully laid plans of mice and men. But she leaves the other half, or nearly so, for us to govern. Your task is not to predict the storm, but to build the dikes so formidable that no flood can breach them. Consider the rise of the Medici in Florence. They did not simply wait for opportunity. They positioned themselves at the confluence of commerce, religion, and politics. They built a financial network so vast that kingdoms depended on their credit. When famine struck, they imported grain. When war loomed, they financed both sides to a degree. They did not control the events themselves, but they built a system of such immense resilience and influence that no event could truly destroy them. They made themselves indispensable to the very functioning of their world. This is the unblinking gaze upon fortune's wheel. It is to understand that your power must not be a single, towering pillar, vulnerable to a single strike. It must be a web, with strands of influence in many domains. Your wealth, your alliances, your knowledge, your public favor. These are the buttresses of your dike. When one is weakened, the others must hold. Look to your own domain. Are you reliant on a single client, a single stream of revenue, a single patron or protector? If so, you are not a prince. You are a hostage. You have built your house on a geological fault, and you pray it will not tremble. This is not strategy, it is superstition. The dominant leader is always scanning the horizon. Not for certainty. He asks not, what will happen, but what could happen? And for every conceivable, what if? He has a contingency, a pivot, an alternative path to power. He diversifies his dependencies so that others rely on him from multiple independent directions. He cultivates relationships with rising powers, not just established ones. He invests in new knowledge before the old becomes obsolete. This is a cold and relentless form of preparation. It is the work done in the quiet hours, long before the crisis is visible to the common eye. It is the capital of power you accumulate, not to spend, but to have as a reserve when the world turns against you. Fortune favors the bold, it is said. This is a half-truth. Fortune favors the prepared bold. The man who has built his dikes can channel the flood to drown his rivals and irrigate his own fields. He can turn disaster into opportunity, because he alone saw the shape of the water before it fell from the sky. You are no longer a player reacting to the game. You have become the architect of the board itself. You have moved from being a piece to a hand, and now to the mind that designs the very rules of play. This is the culmination of the protocol: isolation, dependence, fear, cunning, and finally, this sovereign foresight. You have learned to command the human terrain. But the ultimate application of this power is not merely to defend. It is to expand, to project your will beyond your immediate circle and shape the world itself to your design. The final lesson is not of defense, but of empire. Let this be your new reality. You have learned that power is not taken by force, but orchestrated through perception. You do not command loyalty, you architect dependence. You do not seek love, you cultivate a calculated fear. You are no longer a participant in the game, but its hidden architect. The strings of human ambition now lie in your hands, and they must never see you pull them. This is the essence of true control, to shape the wills of others, while they remain convinced the shape is their own. Is this not the ultimate sovereignty? The world belongs to those who understand this. If these truths have found purchase in your mind, then your education has only just begun. The comment section is your court. Enter your stratagems and observations there. Subscribe to this channel for more principles of power await, and share this discourse with a select few. For these are not lessons for the multitude, but weapons for the chosen.